The cabin lights were dim, passengers half asleep, and the steady hum of the engines lulled everyone into silence. In row 8, a woman slept soundly, just another traveler on a late-night flight. But then, over the crackle of the crew's radio, a single word shattered the calm. Viper. In that instant, the flight crew froze. Who was Viper, and why was this stranger on their plane? The flight was routine, or at least it seemed that way. A red-eye bound for the East Coast, the kind of flight most passengers boarded simply to sleep through. The cabin lights had dimmed, casting the rows in a soft glow broken only by the occasional flicker of a seatbelt sign. The engines hummed steadily, a background lullaby that had already coaxed many into slumber. In row 8, she sat. Window seat. Head tilted slightly against the plastic curve of the fuselage. To the crew, she was just another traveler. Dark hair pulled into a loose braid, sweatshirt sleeves covering her arms. The kind of quiet presence that blends into the anonymity of air travel. Nothing about her demanded attention. Nothing except the faintest air of someone used to being unseen. Flight attendants moved gracefully down the aisle, checking belts and blankets. Their voices hushed as they whispered offers of water to the few who were still awake. Everything was ordinary, and yet, sometimes, even before the first crack in routine appears, the air shifts, a sixth sense. Something unspoken, a tension that hides just beneath the surface. One attendant, Mark, noticed it first. He couldn't explain why, but every time he passed row 8, he slowed slightly. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was the way her body never quite shifted like a restless sleeper's would. Her stillness was too precise, like the rest she clung to wasn't just fatigue, it was discipline. But for now, no one said anything. She was just a passenger. At the front of the plane, the captain and first officer maintained radio contact with air traffic control, exchanging the usual updates on altitude and coordinates. Routine. Predictable. Hours into the flight, as most of the passengers had surrendered to sleep, Mark stood near the galley chatting softly with another crew member. They spoke about nothing in particular. Weekend plans, the oddities of overnight flights, completely unaware that within minutes, everything ordinary would shatter. Because outside the pressurized calm of the cabin, another voice was preparing to break through the radio. A voice that carried a single word. One that would change the meaning of this flight forever. And in row 8, the woman slept on, unaware, or perhaps too aware, of what was about to catch up with her. The radio crackled. A brief burst of static. And then the words sliced through the calm like a blade. Viper! For a heartbeat, the cabin seemed to hold its breath. The flight attendants froze mid-step, half turning toward the cockpit as if the word itself might have jumped from the speakers and into the cabin. Mark's hand hovered near the intercom, uncertain whether to alert the captain or dismiss it as some obscure aviation code. But this wasn't part of any routine. Not this word. At the front, the first officer's eyes narrowed. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, not over the PA but to the captain. His voice tight with a mixture of confusion and recognition. The captain's brow furrowed. "Viper?" he repeated, almost incredulously. There was a pause. Then the radio crackled again, repeating the call from somewhere beyond their control, somewhere that clearly knew more than they did about this passenger. Back in row 8, the woman stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open for a brief second. She didn't look startled, only calm, composed, as if she had been expecting this. Her hand brushed the strap of her bag, a gesture so small it seemed insignificant, yet it carried an unspoken tension that spoke volumes. Mark's gaze flicked to her, the slow dawning of understanding spreading like ice across his chest. The name Viper wasn't just a word. It was a signal, a key to an identity that had been hidden in plain sight. He swallowed hard. Passengers continued to slumber, oblivious to the storm building just rows away. The captain keyed the microphone, his voice steady but measured. "Flight for 12 to tower, repeat. Did you just say Viper?" There was a pause before a faint response crackled back, confirming the word. The crew exchanged glances heavy with unspoken questions. Who was Viper? Why now? And most importantly, was anyone else on board aware? The woman in row 8, still seated, adjusted her posture slightly. To the casual observer, it might have been nothing more than shifting in her seat. But to trained eyes, every movement was calculated, deliberate, protective. She wasn't just a passenger. She was someone who carried a past that could no longer remain hidden. Mark felt his pulse quicken. He had seen enough over the years to know that some passengers arrive with baggage far heavier than their suitcases. And now, in a flash of realization, he understood. The quiet, unassuming woman in row 8 was more than she seemed. She was a person whose name alone commanded respect, caution, even fear. And the very mention of it over the radio had just set the cabin, and the crew, on high alert. The plane hummed along its trajectory, serene from the outside, but inside, tension had erupted. The calm of the flight was gone, replaced by the electric charge of revelation. All eyes, even those still asleep in spirit if not in body, were about to witness a story unfold that would leave no one aboard unchanged. The cabin was silent, though the engines hummed their constant drone. Every movement seemed amplified, the rustle of blankets, the clink of a cup, even the soft shuffle of shoes on the aisle carpet. Mark approached row 8 cautiously, heart hammering in his chest. The crew's earlier whispers were gone. Now, there was only the weight of a secret too large to ignore. "Ma'am?" he said softly, not wanting to alarm the other passengers. The woman's eyes met his, calm and unflinching, and in that instant he understood. She knew they knew. She had been counting on this moment, had prepared for it, had lived for it in countless scenarios that never involved the oblivious flight crew, until now. The captain, who had joined silently behind Mark, cleared his throat. "Could you clarify something for us?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral, professional. But even he couldn't mask the tension in his voice. The words hung in the air, heavy with the unspoken implication. "Who are you?" The woman straightened, a small, controlled smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Viper," she said softly, a single word that carried history, authority, and weight. She didn't need to elaborate. The crew could feel it. In her presence, titles and roles became irrelevant. What they were witnessing was the quiet assertion of someone whose past could command entire operations, whose name alone evoked loyalty and respect. Passengers, oblivious to the unfolding drama, murmured in sleep or shifted in their seats, unaware that the ordinary flight had just become extraordinary. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. He had handled unusual situations before, medical emergencies, unruly passengers, but nothing like this. This wasn't about protocol or procedure. It was about the convergence of past and present, a collision that could not be undone. Questions buzzed in the captain's mind. How did she get on this flight? Who knows she's here? And what exactly does Viper mean in this context? He realized that answers might not come easily or safely. The woman's calm demeanor suggested she had faced far greater stakes than any air travel mishap. For a moment, there was only tension, suspended like the thin air outside the fuselage. Then, slowly, the crew's initial shock began to shift into respect. They understood. They were in the presence of someone extraordinary. They didn't need the full story to recognize the significance. The revelation didn't need exposition. It demanded acknowledgement, silence, and a careful recalibration of how this flight would proceed. As Mark stepped back, the woman reclined slightly, returning to her poised stillness, but her eyes never left the crew. The message was clear. She was no threat here, yet she was not to be underestimated. The radio's earlier transmission had pulled back a curtain, exposing a world hidden beneath ordinary appearances. A world the flight crew had only just begun to glimpse. And as the engines droned on, steady and unrelenting, row 8 held the secret of Viper. The ordinary flight had ended. What remained was the tension, the awe, and the silent understanding that sometimes, even in the most mundane places, extraordinary lives pass quietly until the moment they cannot.